Welcome to the third edition of the Fave 5 podcast. I'm Stan Garfield, your host, and I'm joined today by my good friend John Bommarito. John, welcome to the
Hello,
Fave 5 podcast.
hello, Stan. Fave five. I mean, if I'm number three, it must be Fave five of yours. Cool.
That's right, indeed you are. And in fact, I'm interviewing a podcasting host himself. So it's a special privilege to do that.
It's a
And
little
you've been
weird to
doing
be on this end.
podcasting. What number podcast are you on now?
Somewhere around 90. I guess it depends because I have a count that's on the YouTube channel that tells you how many videos are there, but I also have a count on the place where I post the podcast, and it looks like it's less than 90. So I'm not sure how that works out. Maybe I've got a couple of videos posted twice or something. I
Got it.
honestly don't have time to go back and look,
Yeah,
but
I got it.
let's just near 90.
And you've been doing it for about 3 years?
October of 2020. So
Okay.
we were wearing masks except when the artists were singing. I started with Chris DuPont on October, I'm going to say 7th. That's
All right.
something I could look up if the date was important.
No, but you're coming up on 5 years then. Is that right?
Yep, coming up on
Okay,
5 years, pretty quick.
great.
I should
Well,
I should
well,
do something special.
it's right. Um, I start out by telling how we met, and it's interesting. I'm not exactly sure
Nor am I.
when we became friends. I do remember seeing you introduce acts at the Arc, and at that time I didn't know you yet. So I'm guessing that it may have been because you came to a house concert and we met that way. Does that sound plausible?
It's also my guess, and which house concert it was specifically, I don't know. Did I make it to David Wilcox? I think so.
Okay.
There's you've had several great ones, and I haven't made them all, but I've made quite a handful, and I really don't remember the starting point of our friendship either, but my guess would be the same as yours, probably one of your house concerts. How did I hear about it? That's the question, because you invite people, and if you didn't know me, why would you invite me?
Yeah, so we must have had some interaction, or you talked to someone else who was coming to the house concert or something of that kind. Now I do know you were at the Marshall Crenshaw house concert,
Correct.
but I don't remember the sequence. But in any case,
That was after that was yeah, we'd
that was
known each
after.
other.
Okay,
Yeah.
I recall always being impressed by you up on stage, at the an important local broadcaster introducing people. So I was flattered that you would come to the house concert and that you would eventually become friends with me. But then I remember asking you at least once to introduce one of our performers. I think when Ari Hest played at our house, I think I asked you to introduce him, and you may
Sounds
have
right.
done that another time. So that's probably where it goes back to somewhere in a house concert, and then
Mutual love of music. That's what we have. I mean,
mutual love of music.
that's why we're friends, because we
That's right,
love music.
indeed. But we're getting into some other things that you like to do here during the podcast. We're going to start out by talking about your background. So let's start out by asking you, when and where were you born?
The hospital in Detroit, known as St. John's in 1967. I was told at one point by my mother, if my memory serves me correctly, I was named after the doctor. It is more likely I was named after the hospital or the guy in the Bible. Not really sure. I don't think the doctor's name was John. I think she was just pulling my leg. But yeah, St. John's Hospital. And I grew up in Warren, Michigan, not far from there.
Did you ever get called by any other name like Johnny or Jack, or were you always John?
Uh, Not my family.
Yeah.
My neighbor Dave, who has a German Austrian background, and his parents would call me Johann for fun, just because it was fun. And
Yeah.
then my dear friend Kim, who I've known since second grade, calls me Johnny B still to this day. And I call her Kimmy C, even though her last name doesn't start with a C anymore. It starts with a W, which doesn't roll off the tongue at all.
No,
Kimmy
no.
W. Now, Kimmy C rhymes with Johnny B. So yeah, there's a handful of people who call me Johnny, but I really don't. It's not something I prefer necessarily. It's a term of endearment from a handful of people. But
Right.
I'll admit that that's the DJ name that I adopted when I started doing radio at WHFR. I started using Johnny B until I realized it makes me sound kind of young and not necessarily immature isn't the word I'm looking for, but let, you couldn't take me as seriously if I used my real name. And so I just started using my real name.
Got it. Well, when we lived in St. Louis, the local rock station there was KXOK, Top 40 Radio, and their most famous disc jockey was Johnny Rabbit. So,
There you go. Yeah, Johnny Fever, WKRP. Another reason
right,
I could have
that's
gone
right.
by Johnny, I suppose. But um,
So, where have you lived along the way?
well, my sister, when we lived in Warren, bought a house down the road in Roseville and said, "Hey, you want to be my roommate?" Chance to move out of the parents' house at, I don't know, 20 years old. I can't remember how old I was exactly. Heck yeah. So we moved down the road, literally maybe 6 minutes up 12 Mile. Grew up at 12 in Shaner. That was 12 in Utica. So anybody who knows the east side of Detroit knows those are pretty close, but it was fine. I eventually got a job in Miami. So I moved to the Miami area in a city called Pembroke Pines. Pembroke Pines is basically between Miami and Fort Lauderdale. I created an opportunity to move back home after about 16 months. So I temporarily lived back in the house with my sister until I got my own apartment in Sterling Heights to run my business out of. And then she got engaged and married and sold me the house. So I lived in the house for a third time. So Roseville three times, Sterling
Yeah.
Heights and Warren once. And
Hmm.
then from Roseville, I got married and moved to Livonia, and then eventually we found during a downturn in the economy a great foreclosed home in Plymouth when our next door neighbor offered, well, their parent actually offered us cash for our home because she wanted to live closer to her daughter as she aged. So we took the opportunity to move into a lovely, I don't believe I live here kind of home in Plymouth Township.
And
That's
how do
it.
you like
That's
living in Plymouth?
it's great. I mean, I had very nice neighbors growing up in Warren. I'm still in touch with lots of those folks, but I could not have chosen better neighbors here in Plymouth. We actually hang out quite a bit with our neighbors to the north of us. So,
That's great. Who was in your family when you were growing up?
well, two sisters and a brother. I'm the youngest of four, and it went girl, boy, girl, boy. So Lori, David, Diane, John, two parents and a dog. And at some point, my dad had more than one dog, but when I was growing up at the age of 5, he got his first German Shepherd, which eventually became two and three. Now he's down to one German Shepherd mix dog. But yeah, that became his hobby when he retired, was working the dogs at you know, dog competition things and go to classes and train him and all that kind of stuff. But definitely a family member. If you've ever had a pet, you know how much of a family
Yeah.
member they are. So his dog, his current dog, Brody, is the best dog of them all. Don't tell the others.
Did you have extended family members around that you'd see regularly?
We mostly hung out with my mom's side. The
Hmm.
Bommarito cousins were quite a bit older than all of us by
Hmm.
about 10 years or so. So we saw them once in a while. My aunt and uncle, who I adore, no longer with us on the Bommarito side, were wonderful people as well. But most of the older cousins, had very successful careers and moved out of state. So none of them actually live in Michigan anymore, but we still keep in touch. And the cousins on my mom's side, those are the ones we celebrated all the birthdays and the holidays with. And that was a pretty big family. One family had six, another had three, and there was the four of us. And so you got all of us together and all the parents and the grandma and grandpas, and you had to have a pretty big house to host something, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then as we got older and people started having kids, hosting Christmas became very difficult too. Because like who's got a house big enough for all of these people?
Yeah.
And so now we really don't see them very often. Maybe once a year we might try and schedule something with the cousins, but for the most part, yeah, it was just the immediate family and cousins on my mom's side.
And do you have good memories of all those people being together for those occasions?
I don't have a ton of memories from being young, but yes, I don't have certainly no bad memories.
Yeah.
My cousins and I all got along very well. And, there's the one that's the closest to your age, which is always going to be the one you gravitated to
Yeah.
when you were younger. But the one that had the same month of birthday that I did, we'd always celebrate John and Jeanette's birthday together because it was, within 7 or 8 days of each other. So that was we got to get together for November birthdays. And so, of course, Jeanette was a close cousin too, just because of that. But my cousin Ron was the one that was just a few months younger than I was, and we tend to stick together when we got together.
Yeah. So what did your parents do?
Mom was a mom. She briefly worked at the Macomb Community College doing something that I actually have no recollection of what it was, but
Hmm.
she stayed home and took care of kids, which is a job. But Dad was a foreman at Chrysler, and I don't remember a ton about that other than he would not answer the phone because he was always afraid it was work, telling him he needed to come back and fix something. So
Yeah.
if he got home from work and you answered the phone, he wasn't home. Um, and then when he retired, he finally became approachable and somebody you could, talk to about stuff. But yeah, he was a foreman at Chrysler, and actually, as a backup plan, he got his electrician's license, so he would occasionally dabble in that as might do it for money, might just do it because family needed some help. But it was always good to have. Oh, you want to move that light to a different part of the ceiling? Okay, I can help you. That
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So
And did you ever go to work with them?
no. I don't think I was welcome at work with him.
Was that
It was a
right?
foundry, so who wants
Yeah.
to bring their kid to a foundry? No.
Right. So when you were in elementary school and then later on in high school, what did you like to do in those two stages of life?
You missed middle school. Elementary school, I don't have a ton of memories of
Okay.
elementary school other than specific things about my actual elementary school, which I still occasionally visit. My dad still lives in the neighborhood I grew up in, and every now and then I'll take his dog for a walk into the elementary school lot. And I'll walk by the flagpole, and I remember the girl in fourth grade who challenged me to a fight by the flagpole. The girl, that's right, I said girl. I'll walk by the class I had the room that I had sixth grade in, and I remember not me, but our class gave our teacher a nervous breakdown. I remember that. And then somewhere in, I think it was fourth or fifth grade, I remember trying to break ice with my tennis shoes. I do not recommend this, children. I fell flat on my head and cracked my head open. That might have been third grade. I don't remember anymore because clearly I messed my head up. But doing things, what did I do for fun in elementary school? Gosh, I really don't remember. I know at some point I met some kids who played Dungeons and Dragons, and now it's much cooler now than it was then because you were a total nerd if you were playing Dungeons and Dragons then. And yes, I was a nerd actually. Um, at some point, there was a softball team that I was on with like some church that I don't even think I went to the church, but I wasn't very good, but I loved baseball, so I did that for a little bit. I used to ride my bike a ton, and then I turned 16. Uh, you know what happens then?
Yeah.
Uh, oh, car. But I still like riding my bike. I haven't done it. I've done it once all year, which is pathetic. Um, what else did I do as a kid? Not a heck of a lot. There
Well, you
was
mentioned middle school. Did you have interests that you remember from that era?
That might have been where I met the kids that I played Dungeons and
Okay.
Dragons with. I'm
All right.
trying to remember specifically what era of my life that was. You know,
Hmm.
my couple doors down neighbor Dave was 2 years older than me, the same age as my sister, and we would hang out with him a lot too. So I have memories of building like a giant card house on the floor of his living room, and we ended up getting on the it might have been the Channel 7 News. They had like
Oh,
this
really?
special feature. Uh, yeah, just stuff like that. And we had a swimming pool, so we were obviously one of the houses kids would come to and
Yeah.
swim. But so did he. So with between the two of us, somebody was swimming somewhere probably. Um, I don't remember doing a lot else. I know my brother liked to build ice hockey rinks in the backyard, and I wasn't very good at hockey, so they stuck me in the goal, of course. But your 4 year younger brother in the goal, wouldn't you? Um, yeah, I don't know. If somebody told me to write a book about growing up and what I remember, it would be a very short book.
Well, what about in high school? Can you remember what activities you got into then?
Again, kind of a nerd, but I did enjoy stage crew. I didn't try out for a musical until my senior year. I finally had enough guts to try out for a part, but I can't sing. Well, I can sing, but nobody wants to hear me sing, including myself. So West Side Story is what we did in my senior year, and it had Officer Krupke, who does not sing, and I landed that part, and
Okay.
I enjoyed that. But the other 3 years I was on stage crew and I quite enjoyed that. I was also on the yearbook staff for a few years. In fact, just this past weekend, and I don't know when this is going to hit the airwaves, so to speak, but my friend Brian, who I was on yearbook staff with, was cleaning out his house and he found a book full of slides that we had put the yearbook together with. So I'm now in possession of a book full of slides that ended up becoming our yearbook. I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but he was going to throw them out. I'm like, no, 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 hold on to those. I don't know why. I have no idea. But yeah, I remember having fun with yearbook. I remember being on the school newspaper, which actually led me to my first career, which is kind of funny.
Do you remember any of your lines from West Side Story?
Knock it off, settle down. Yeah, that was one of them. I was a cop. No, that's the only one I remember at the
Okay.
moment. But if I watched West Side Story, like I have the videotape of us doing it somehow.
Oh.
Somehow there was copies made. I
Hmm.
could probably still remember everybody's lines because if you're just one guy and you have to sit through everyone's rehearsals, much like learning the words to a song that you like, you learn everybody's lines. And so I knew everybody's, I was the understudy for Doc too. I
Oh, okay.
don't think he sang. Um, but yeah, I had to sit there for everything until it was my turn to get on stage and do my lines.
Yeah.
So I listened over and over and over to everybody's lines. And still sometimes there are triggers when I hear somebody say something, I think of the line from West Side Story that comes next, which is really weird.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
So when you were young, what did you want to be when you grew up?
The odd thing about that is between 10th and 11th grade, when there's that pressure, pick a lane. What do you want to be when you grow up? Where are you going to go to college? That whole like, you got to decide now because you got to get on the college path. Um, I grew up in Warren and in Warren Cousino's high school, there was a radio station that I used to listen to. And something about the fact that my siblings all played music and I didn't, although I had the opportunity, there was a piano in the house. I couldn't play except for maybe one finger my way through like Color My World or lean on me. I could figure out the melody. I couldn't imagine playing with my left hand, just the one hand. My brother had a drum set in the basement, and when he wasn't home, I might go down and do what he did and try and play along with the records. And I gave up after I tried to play along with a Police record because Stuart Copeland's a pretty damn good drummer. I knew I couldn't do Neil Peart of Rush, but Stuart Copeland, I wasn't even thinking about how good he was until I tried. So I gave up on that.
Hmm.
Though I love the guitar, my sister Lori played the guitar. I never felt myself wanting to play it until later in life. So I wanted to I obviously have a love of music. It came from somewhere. Oh, look, three siblings who all play music, a mom who loved music, a dad who still has music on. If you're in his house, there's probably music on. So I ended up somehow becoming the I wanted to be a DJ. So I talked to the guy who ran the station in the Warren Cousino High School. He was all happy to have some interested kid until he found out what school I went to. Well, Warren has three different school districts, or at least it did then. And the district that I was in was not the same district as Warren Cousino. And so I was turned away. The year I graduated, or the year after I graduated, they started letting kids from De La Salle High School, which was the Catholic high school that actually took over my middle school. They allowed them to be part of the program, but I couldn't, as a 10th or 11th or 12th grader, get into that program to explore this interest of mine that eventually became my career 20 years later. Fun story. But it was
Which high school did you go to?
I went to Warren Woods Tower. So between 10th and 11th grade, another pivotal time, they combined the two high schools and they sold the middle school that I went to De La Salle. So they combined Warren Woods High School and Robert S. Tower High School, and it became Warren Woods Tower. So I was 2 years, I was a Tower student. Then the next 2 years, I was Warren Woods Tower. So,
When you go back to your youth, your extreme youth, do you remember anything that you aspired to back then? You probably didn't have radio in mind then, did you?
no, I don't think so. Yeah, probably some of that basic stuff like, firefighter,
Yeah.
policeman, that kind of stuff. I really don't remember too much of being young and having an aspiration for much of anything that was out of the ordinary. Didn't find myself wanting to be a ballet dancer or something like that. Just, the typical kid stuff,
Yeah.
nothing extraordinary.
So where did you go to college?
Well, that gets complicated. So all of my friends in high school decided to live on campus at Oakland University, and I also decided to go there, but I had gotten a full-time job, so I was a commuter. And then I could never quite decide what it was I wanted my degree in. I was kind of tossed between communications because of my interest in radio and business because I was working in a business. So I did a little bit of both and I never really landed on one or the other. And so instead of finishing at Oakland University, which is where I actually got my first taste of doing radio, I finished at Macomb Community College. Not normally the way you do things. You don't usually spend 3 years at a university and then finish at a community college, but I wanted to have something for my time. So I got my associate's degree first
Hmm.
and then spent about 10 or 11 years, I think it was 11 years, working before I had to return to college. So that's a whole nother phase of life a little bit later on. That was ended up being U of M Dearborn. And I always tell people I chose U of M Dearborn over Ann Arbor because the parking is better. That is 100% the reason I chose it.
That's an unusual reason for college choice.
Well, I mean, I was getting into U of M, so that's good.
Yeah.
But if I could have my life less inconvenienced by not having to figure out where the heck I was going to park for class, that's good for me. So it actually it's a very good thing because it helped me find my career.
Yeah. So what did you study at Dearborn?
Pretty much the same path. I couldn't decide between business and
Mm-hmm.
communications, though I was more concentrated on business that time around because the aforementioned friend Brian, who had gotten a degree in psychology, ended up getting a career in marketing. So he was kind of trying to help me. So we kind of skipped a phase. We skipped the what did you do for a living phase, and that'll kind of help understand how I got to what I chose. So
Okay.
right out of high school, because I was working for the newspaper in high school, and there was this record store that my friend Dave, the neighbor, brought me to called Record Time. And I just loved going there. And so I wanted to help the owner. And I said, hey, we're looking for advertisers in our newspaper. He says, oh, I don't have any money for advertising. I said, how about we create a column for you called Record Time Rock Trivia, and you offer a discount for people who get the answers right. And he liked that. So we went ahead and did that. And he liked how much passion I had for his place. So before I graduated from high school, he said, I'm getting married this summer and I'm looking for somebody to work for me. Would you like a job? And I ended up working there for just short of 10 years because of that. Head buyer manager, all the titles you could possibly have, as I was his first ever paid employee. So that led me to eventually, okay, well, I can't do anything more here. I can't own the place. So I'm at the top except for owning the place. And I like him, so I'm not going to knock him out. I ended up getting a job with one of my suppliers. I bought from companies all over the country, and one of them was a supplier in Miami. So I moved down there, as I mentioned, to take a job as a head buyer down there. Not really necessarily feeling like I belonged there. I created an opportunity for myself to basically start a company selling Canadian imported CDs from my home. So I hooked up with the vendor that I was using for my Canadian supplier. We hashed out a plan to start a business, and somebody caught wind of it, and I got laid off, quote unquote, laid off from my job, and they replaced me on Monday. Uh, so I moved back home a little sooner than I was supposed to. Ran a business for almost 5 years again, right before 20. I shut down at the end of 2010. What year did 9/11 happen? 2001?
2001.
Okay, so I shut down December 31st, 2000 is when I ended up shutting down my business. And not because I wanted to, it's because the industry had changed so much. So that is when my dear wife said, "You should go back to college." Well, actually, she was saying that as the business was nearing its end. "You should go back to college." I'm like, I've been a buyer, a manager. I've owned a business essentially. Somebody else owned it, but I had part ownership in it and I ran it by myself for the most part. That's a pretty good resume. I think I'll be fine. Guess who was right? Not me. Um, the associate's degree didn't really help open any doors for job opportunities. So I took heed and consulted my friend Brian, what should I do? Or, where do you think I should be when I grow up? And he said, what did you like most about running your business? Well, at the time, faxes were still a relevant part of doing business. And I said, well, I really enjoyed creating the faxes that I sent to my customers to let them know what new releases were coming out that they might want to pre-order. He said, that's marketing. I said, oh, well, okay. I guess I like that. I didn't necessarily like sales, but I like the idea of people getting excited about what it was that was there and me being creative about it.
Hmm.
So I chose that. Um, Eventually you'll ask a question that leads to this, so I'll just get it in here because we're in my life at U of M Dearborn, and it's probably my second semester there. First semester is when the towers fell. Somewhere in the second semester, a student that was in a couple of my classes came up to me one day and said, "Hey, I wasn't here the other day. Did you get the notes?" And I said, "I always get the notes, but you don't want to try and read my writing. What's your email address?" And so she wrote down WHFRPD@hfcc.edu. Now I expected first name, last name at Yahoo or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't even think I knew her name. I just recognized her because she was a cute girl, and I'm a man. So do you work at a radio station? She said, yeah, it's right next door. And right next door to U of M Dearborn is Henry Ford, now not community college, but at the time it was a community college. They dropped the community. And I said, really? She said, yeah, it's a 1 credit hour class if you want to take it and volunteer. Well, now 10th grade me is going a little bonkers because now I have an opportunity to do this thing that I couldn't do. I tried it at Oakland, but it was really like a downstairs to upstairs station that I knew nobody was listening to. So it was
Hmm.
like playing records for yourself.
Yeah.
This was a station that had a 5 to 10 mile radius from this campus. So I knew somebody would listen. And so it felt more real. And of course, I'm going to take that 1 credit hour class. So I took it in the spring semester and I volunteered there for just short of 10 years. Ended up being the folk music director right out of the box because nobody was doing that at the time. And that opened up a whole bunch of doors too. And that led me to the next phase of my career. So I don't want to get too far ahead of your questioning, but the U of M Dearborn experience did get me the degree. I have the bachelor's degree, business, business degree with a marketing focus. But I didn't end up ever getting a job doing marketing for a living, though you could say when I was working in commercial radio, I was always softly selling something. It isn't necessarily a big sales thing that you're doing there, but you are kind of selling something when you're working for a commercial radio station. So I did use those skills there, but I never officially used things from the book. I could tell you the two things I learned from both rounds of college. Round one at Oakland University in my rhetoric class, it was organization is the key to success. And she was talking about papers when you're writing your paper, but she said it also applies to your life. And I've remembered that for 40 years. In one of my business classes at U of M Dearborn, it was a management class. And this was one of the, what do they call them, adjunct teachers when they're not just a professor, they have a job, but they come in to teach a class.
Hmm.
And he said, catch people doing something right. And that stuck with me. I said, oh, next time I'm a manager, I'm going to remember that because I always got told what I did wrong.
Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
not the best way to encourage
Right.
people to do a good job. So maybe I went to college for all those years, and those are the only two things I remember. But those are some pretty cool
Those are
things to
good.
remember. Those are good ones to pull out.
So keep rolling along with your career because that's the next question. What are the highlights of your career? So you already started out, so keep going.
Yeah, so WHFR gave me the opportunity to do a radio show once a week. It moved around days during the week until I finally landed on the perfect day for my show, Sundays. I had to wait for somebody to vacate the spot. But the Acoustic Alternative Show, which is also the name of my current podcast, was a Sunday morning show after it was a Tuesday evening show after whatever other days it was on. I also, at some point before I committed to doing just acoustic alternatives, was double timing myself there and doing Bommarito's big band show. I called it B cubed for short sometimes. So I got to play big band for a couple of hours a week as well. I like that. I didn't do that as long, but I think I was filling somebody else's slot for a while and until somebody else came along to do it. It was quite fun to do. But the acoustic alternative show was really the beginning of who I am as a broadcaster or podcaster today. Um, I would have to say that as I was going into it, I was admiring other personalities on Detroit radio. So Rob Reinhardt and Ann DeLisi were both people that I looked up to and listened to and enjoyed their styles, especially their interview styles, their music selections. They were the kind of people that I wanted to become as a radio host. So without copying them, I tried to adapt what I heard from them and become my own self. I'm not sure who told me to do it, but I did it. I recorded every show that I did at WHFR for a very long time, and I still have them all. But I would go back and listen and kind of listen for things that I could improve on. Now, my wife gave me one of the better pieces of advice that I probably wouldn't have picked up on, but when she used to listen to my show, she would say, "You do this a lot. Drives me crazy. Drink more water." Guess what? Here's some water. I still have water with me all the
You
time
do.
when I'm broadcasting because you don't want that. It is a pretty annoying sound. Sorry to everybody who's listening in your headphones and you had to listen to that. Um, so because this show format was kind of singer-songwriter folk, I used to say the best singer-songwriter, modern folk, and Celtic music on the air. I used to play some Celtic music in the show as well. I would get CDs sent to me for the station, not to me personally, of those kinds of music. I would report the playlist so we get more. And I started getting contacted about doing some interviews, and I would do some phone interviews, but we also had a great performance studio, so it could have been a local person or somebody passing through town. And big turning point really is when Brian Vander Ark of the Verve Pipe. The Verve Pipe had a very successful 90s and the mid 90s. They had a big hit called The Freshman, another one called Photograph. They released a follow-up album that did very poorly for them. The album after that had the potential to be a big album for them. Unfortunately, guess what day it was released? 9/11/2001. People were really not interested in hearing your new release that year. And so, though it is probably my favorite of their records, it did not do well. And it has some great songs that still stand up today. They still do them in concert today. But the band broke up, and he was kind of in this sad place of his life after having been a touring musician touring the world, opening for Kiss, opening for INXS. They were headliners as well, but not at big a stadiums as they would be with Kiss and INXS. And so now he's got this solo album. There's some pretty sad songs on it. It's, very well written songs. And I invite him to the studio. He's never met me. I've never met him. I don't know a ton about him, but boy, I can tell you I researched the hell out of that interview. I watched the movie Rockstar, which he played the bass player in, if you didn't know, with Mark Wahlberg. At the end of the movie, Mark Wahlberg is singing his song, Colorful in the movie. And I did as much research as I could to make that and because it was the biggest person I had ever interviewed at that point. I've had some pretty cool people in before that, but that was somebody who had a number one hit on modern rock radio. And so, kind of a big deal. Well, I could, if the CD wasn't in another room, I would go grab it and read the inscription on the CD, but it was something along the lines of, "You're a really gifted interviewer." Here's a guy who I just told you some of his history, telling me that I'm good at what I do. And he told me, "You asked me a lot of questions I've never been asked before." And this was a confidence builder for me alongside of the station advisor there who also said something very meaningful. He said, "John, I get a lot of people through here, but I don't get a lot of people through here with the gift. You have the gift." And that was like, wow, okay, he's seen a lot of people here. And he's telling me while I'm getting my degree next door to get a real job that I'm good at this. And now this Brian Vanderark guy is telling me I'm good at this. And then I won a couple of awards from the Michigan Association of Broadcasters. I'm like, okay, okay. It was kind of like the universe going,
Yeah.
pay attention. This
Yeah.
might be where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
I mean, financially, it was probably the worst decision I could make, but passion-wise, it was 100% what I was supposed to do. And so I have archives of all these shows and all these interviews I did at WHFR. But while I was there, I had moved to Livonia, as I mentioned, and growing up in the Detroit area, you don't really realize there's another radio market so close. Like Van Arbor's not that far away. It's an hour away from where I grew up. But there it is. There's a radio market in Ann Arbor. And when I moved to Livonia, I discovered this station, Ann Arbor's 1071, which was playing some singer-songwriters not too dissimilar to who I was playing on the folk station, the singer-songwriter stuff. I was hearing Ari Hest. I was hearing Stephen Kellogg. I was hearing, gosh, who else? It was just artists like that were new to me, but sounded kind of like what I was doing. And I'm like, that's where I want to work. So randomly, I sent them a resume for a job that didn't exist. Didn't get it, obviously. Signed up for the email alerts from the station manager at the time. And one day he sends one out saying, "Hey, I'm doing this cancer run and I'm looking for people to donate to the cause." And I'm like, hmm. So I just lost my mother and I wrote him a note. I said, I'd love to give you some money for your cause here, but I don't have a job right now. If you give me a 2 week trial at your radio station, I'll give you my first paycheck. Somehow that worked. And I ended up working there for almost 10 years as well. Oh, I'm sorry, 15 years. Um, I did both WHFR in Dearborn and 1071 at the same time. I could do my 2 hour shift on a Sunday in Dearborn with nobody in Ann Arbor having any idea that I was on. And then somehow did 7 days a week at Ann Arbor's 1071 part-time, even though I was on 7 days a week. That's called voice tracking, ladies and gentlemen. So eventually they had to make me full-time there, and I found myself not really needing the free job that I was doing anymore. I'm like, well, okay, I'm driving in the opposite direction. That's Dearborn and Ann Arbor. They're pretty far apart. Even though I'm only doing it once a week, I kind of want my Sunday mornings back. So I eventually gave up the gig at WHFR and just concentrated on building a name for myself and doing what I was doing, which was promoting music. And, luckily there, I also landed a Sunday morning program, which sounded similar to what I was doing, but a more commercial version of what I was doing in Dearborn. And through doing both of those shows and doing lots of interviews over the years, I built up relationships with lots of musicians from across the state, the country, some from out of the country. It's strange who remembers me sometimes. So it's been a fun ride. And I'm not doing that on the radio per se anymore, but I am still doing radio, and I'm glad that I'm diversifying and having a good time trying out a vocal jazz show now.
So what are you doing now?
Well, the pandemic was the reason I lost my job. I was the budget cut in Ann Arbor, so I had a couple of jobs that didn't make any sense, like working for the Northville post office for about 10 days in the holidays, torture. Um, I ended up landing a job at Comerica Bank could have been longer, but I left after about 4 months. Somehow they hired me in a management level position with no banking experience. We're still in a pandemic at this point, so that kind of makes sense. Uh, I was approached by my old general manager at WHFR during that time to come take a paid job there, but caveat was it was an 18 and a half hour a week job. Like, that's a tough sell at home. But I ended up finding a way to make it work, excuse me. And then while I was doing that, I had somebody who I had networked through and tried to, he was introducing me to the idea of maybe working for him. He runs the Sun Times News, which is a Dexter Chelsea free paper. And it didn't work out, but I enjoyed our friendship that we developed in the couple of days we spent together. And he remembered me when he was at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and the person who is now my boss was at this meeting, and he said, "You need to get in touch with Molly Motherwell." Well, I knew who she was because I applied for another non-existent job there at one point in my life. So WEMU is the NPR jazz, blues, and news station that serves Washtenaw County. And somehow I got hired to be more or less the tech guy. I was not hired to be on the air. In fact, it was about 2 years of working there before I got a show. But I behind the scenes take care of maintaining all the computers, the automation system. I put together the newsletter. I joke, and I'm more serious than joking, that I say my job should be other duties as assigned, because that's what I do. I just help where I'm needed, and I don't
Yeah.
mind that at all. I like helping people,
Hmm.
and I like making a difference in somebody's day. If somebody emails me from down the hall and says, I'm having trouble. Can you come help me? I'm happy to do it because it makes me feel like I have a purpose. And then I get to do 4 hours of radio a week now too. So I get to have a different purpose there. Maybe I get to interview somebody and talk to them about their jazz record, which I'm still, I'm still discovering more jazz. Uh, Obviously learned some stuff working at a record store, but I didn't delve as deep as I am now. I had some Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday records, Sinatra, Tony Bennett, whatever. But now I'm picking up records from other vocalists like Sarah Vaughan and people like that who I never bought records from before.
So my last question in the first section is about your interests or hobbies. And I think that overlaps because you do a lot of work as an interest or hobby, I would say, in doing playlists and doing radio broadcasts separate from your job. How do you view that? Do you view that as a side interest, or is it overlap with your work?
Well, there's the paid job at WEMU, so that is both an interest and my job. But I do the things that I do with Acoustic Alternatives, the umbrella that is, which is a radio show on two different internet radio stations. It's a podcast that I self-produced, and it's what I started doing actually the week I was furloughed from my job in Ann Arbor. Rather than lose the momentum I had built up doing the Sunday morning show there, I started doing a playlist. And there was a time that the playlist had some sponsorship. So I earned a little bit of money from that. There was a time that the podcast had a little bit of sponsorship. So I earned a little money from that. Started an LLC that still exists, but it's currently not earning me much money except for my tiny bit of money I get on Patreon. I keep it open. Occasionally have to spend some of the money, but that is not a paid job in my eyes. While it's a business, I'm not making anything that amounts to income from it. I'm probably spending more than I'm making from it, which is sad, but I enjoy it enough to keep doing it. I've often considered giving up the weekly YouTube playlist because I don't know that many people are paying attention to it. Podcast seems to have more interest when I get a chance to do those. And the radio shows people seem to really enjoy, especially the Sonic Coast. It's the same show, but I think more people reach out to me hearing it on Sonic Coast than they do on Radio Cobra Detroit. Not that many people are probably listening to either one, but I wish they would because I spent a lot of time putting it together.
So
But
tell us,
it's an interest.
yeah, tell our viewers and listeners about how they can follow those things. And also, you mentioned Patreon sort of in passing, but tell us a little bit more about how someone could support you in Patreon.
It's really one stop. If you go to johnbommarito.com, there are a few tabs. First thing you're going to see is that I'm a mobile disc jockey. I've been a mobile disc jockey since 1985 and I'm still doing it. Sometimes I wonder how much longer I'll do it, but that's the website's basis is that I'm a DJ and I might be doing your wedding someday. Then you'll see tabs across the top and there's one for acoustic alternatives. If you click on that tab, there are links to all of the things that I do, including the Patreon page. There's some samples of some interviews I did at 1071, including Ed Sheeran and Guster and some other folks like that. But all the links to watch the video playlist, to watch the podcast or listen to the podcast, to listen to the radio shows, all in one spot. So johnbommarito.com. Incidentally, there's also a tab for the Song Break, which is the show I do on WEMU. It'll remind you that I'm on Tuesdays and Thursdays from noon to 2. The tagline of that show is celebrating the art of the song. So it's where the Great American Songbook meets the modern day songbook. So of course you're going to hear the Gershwins and the Cole Porters, but you're also finding that a lot of jazz covers exist of Sting songs and James Taylor and Nick Drake and stuff like that. So we're finding a middle ground for those two, and people seem to be enjoying all of it. So I just have it all in one place, johnbommarito.com. Find the info there, and if you feel like you want to support me, that'd be great. Um, I have as the incentive on the Patreon page access to older interviews that I've done. And admittedly, on this date in August, I am way far behind on posting some new stuff, but I've just been so overwhelmingly busy, I haven't had a chance to do it.
So if they want to support you on Patreon and they go to that site you mentioned, they can find it there, or they can go on Patreon and search on Acoustic Alternatives or John Bommarito, right?
I think you'd be able to find it that way too.
Okay. All right. Good. So with that in mind, let's move on to the Fave 5 questions. And in this section, what we normally talk about are books, food, music, sports, and humor. And you've told me you're not a tremendous reader.
I don't have time.
Let me ask you this. Do you watch some shows on TV?
I do. If we just talked about books for a second,
Sure.
the books that I do enjoy is an audio book of a musician's biography read to me by the musician. That's my favorite way to consume a book at this point. So Elvis
Right.
Costello, for example, read
Yeah.
his thing, and it was really enjoyable to hear it in his voice. And a lot of others have done that as well. So when I have time or I find interest, I've few that I'd like to pick up. Like I know there was a Michael McDonald one I wanted to listen to, but I never got around to it. I can't remember the last one I listened to. It might have been Kenny Loggins. I don't even know. TV though, we tend to gravitate towards crime shows and comedies in my house for some reason. Right now, we're enjoying Life in Pieces, which I didn't know existed, and I think it's an old show, but we're laughing at that quite a bit. But over the years, favorites have been obviously Friends. Who doesn't love Friends? Big Bang Theory, Cheers. Why am I drawing a blank on the show with Helen Hunt and
Well,
um,
mad about you.
We loved Mad About You in our house. Simpsons was great for the longest time. I've fallen off watching it, no particular reason other than I just don't have time.
Hmm.
So comedies are always good. We enjoyed some of those, weird, scary shows too, like Dexter and 6 Feet Under and Breaking Bad were great shows. So stuff like that is usually what's on in our house when we're watching TV.
You've told me that you're not a foodie, although your wife is a foodie, but you enjoy eating. You just have a very specific set of things you like to eat, right? What would be some of
Kind
your
of.
favorite things to eat?
Typically what I'm eating in a general week is a chicken salad for lunch. Breakfast is probably, well, actually, I could eat breakfast for all 3 meals. So favorite foods are breakfast foods. Probably not the best for me, but I love most things breakfast. Uh, I know that one of your follow-up questions is about where, but um, yeah, at home it's a lot of chicken and veggies and there's the occasional pork tenderloin. We don't really do a lot of red meat at home, though I like it. We just usually that's more something we do out when we eat out. We don't do a lot of pasta, though I'm Italian, but that's because we're trying to cut back on carbs, and that's an easy carb to give up. Although I do love some butternut squash. Hmm.
Uh,
Um,
If you go out to eat, is there a place you like to go?
if money is no object, La Bisteca, which is on the
Hmm.
border of Plymouth and Livonia,
Hmm.
best steak you will have. It's Piedmontese beef. It's a little leaner cut of beef. I've never had a bad experience there. We go like once a year, maybe twice.
Yeah.
It's expensive, but it's really good. And service is excellent. Food is excellent. Fantastic meal. I just had a surprisingly good meal. And remember, I'm a mobile disc jockey, so I eat a lot of food at events like that. I don't think I've ever said to myself, I would come back here for a meal. I was at a country club in Ann Arbor, and why am I drawing a blank on the name of the country club? DJing a 90th birthday party. And, it was a buffet. And so I do not expect to be wowed by a buffet.
Yeah.
But oh my God, it was so good. It was very tender beef. It was really excellent salmon. I mean, some of the average stuff, it's, salad is salad, but it was a good
Yeah.
salad. But like, I was just like, oh my God, this is so good. I'm at a buffet at a country club. I would come here to eat. Like I would pay to come here to eat. And I've never said that in 40 years of DJing. So, yeah, but La Bistecca, if I was picking a
Okay.
meal to
Got
to
it.
go out for and then money was no object, that's my favorite.
So the next category of music is going to be kind of hard to narrow
Oh,
anything down. But if you had to
you're mean.
say a favorite of something,
You're
whether it's a
mean.
musician, a song, a concert, an album, does anything come to mind, or you have so many that it's hard to choose?
Stan, should I unblur my camera and show people the 18,000
Sure,
CDs I'm
sure.
sitting? No, I'm not going to. Um, I'm sitting in a room with about 18,000 CDs for those who are not able to ascertain what that means. It's an entire bedroom, and there's some in the next room. Actually, there's some downstairs too. But I do have a very strange quirk that I think my friend Ron got me on. He started like rating every movie and every CD he listened to on a 1 to 5 scale. And I'm like, oh, I should do that so that when I get to the end of the year and I'm trying to figure out what my favorite albums of the year are, I can just do the math and I'll do a 10-point scale. So since then, however many years ago that was, I've been rating every record that I listen to on a 1 to 10 scale. And so the record rating file that I have, which has I don't have everything in there, but let's say it has 18,000 in it. If I sorted it by the numbers, my favorite album of all time is Sarah McLachlan's Fumbling Towards Ecstasy. So an album that has a lot of tens and nines on it,
Yeah.
which is hard to get. Now, if I went back and listened to it again today, and I've listened to it recently, do I think I would give everything the same number I gave it 5 years ago? Maybe, maybe not. Tastes change, right? I go back and listen to some of the old albums when they get reissued, and then I renumber them. And I'm like, oh, look, it went down. Oh, look, it went up. So that is a weird thing. Like that when I first started doing it, I can't even tell you how I give something a 6 or a 9. I can't even tell you why, but it's a feeling when I'm listening to the song, like, okay, an 8 is a song I would never skip if it was playing or on the radio. Uh, a 9 is even better than that, but not perfect. A 10 is like never, ever, ever would I turn that song off. I love this song. 5 is like meh. If I was making a best of, it wouldn't make it. That kind of thing. So that's the scale has this weird thing that I can't even describe better than that. But yeah, top 10 albums are not, if you think about the kind of music that Sarah does, that's a very forlorn sounding record. Like she's singing about longing, and there's a song about stalking. But other favorite albums in that top 10 would include the very angry This Fire by Paula Cole, Nine Inch Nails' Pretty Hate Machine. That's not a happy record either. Depeche Mode's Black Celebrations in my top 10 album. That's an album I put on when I'm sad because it's so depressing and beautiful. And for whatever reason, it has the opposite effect on me. Violator, another Depeche Mode album, actually in the top 10. Rush, Moving Pictures. Again, what does Rush have in common with Sarah McLachlan? Nothing other
Canadian.
than Canadian. Exactly right. Um, but musically speaking, I'm kind of all over the place, but I'm
Yeah.
good with that. Working in a record store opened up my eyes to a whole bunch of different music. I was exposed to stuff beyond my top 40 taste. So, incidentally, even one of the records that my boss turned me on to, the Style Council's My Ever-Changing Mood / Cafe Blue, depending on what country you live in. That's an album that I wouldn't know if it wasn't for him, and it's one of my favorite albums. Joe Jackson's Jump and Jive, probably my favorite jazz-oriented record, right? So I'm all over the place,
Yeah.
and I'm happy to be.
What was the first record you bought?
The first 7-inch single I bought was Listen to What the Man Said by Paul McCartney and Wings. This was before I knew he was in this other band. I ended up buying my mom's Meet the Beatles record off of her, but in between there, my first record that I bought with my own money, to my recollection, was a K-Tel album called Dumb Ditties, full of all these crazy novelty songs like Beans in My Ears and My Ding-a-Ling and gosh, what else was on that record? It was a silly record, but I could probably tell you all the words if the songs came on. Um, Beyond that, like the Beatles record from my mom could have been the second record. I honestly don't remember what the second record was, but Dumb Ditties was the first
Uh,
one, which explains a lot about my comedy taste.
and you go to a lot of concerts. What was the last one you
Do
went?
I? Oh, I guess I do. Um, in my discovery of vocal jazz, that I'm still the journey I'm on there. There's a Michigan-based artist called Olivia Van Gore. Olivia, in my opinion, has the she's got the goods. She can make it in a national scene if she just had the time to do it. She's booking a lot of gigs locally, so I know she's driven, she's talented, and I was very surprised a month or so ago when I saw she was doing a show in Lansing where she was doing a Joni Mitchell tribute thing. I'm like, that is totally not what I expect from her, but wow, cool. I hope it comes closer because I can't make it to that. Well, she ended up doing it in Ann Arbor last week at the North Star Lounge, which is a very small place, and um, she admitted on stage that she'd never listened to Joni Mitchell prior to the organizer of that concert, the drummer, asking her to do the show with him. And she did great. She was
Wow.
great. For somebody who didn't know Joni's
Yeah.
music going into learning those songs,
Mhm.
so impressed. So that was the last music I've seen live as of today.
Okay. So switching to sports, I know I should probably ask this in the singular. What sports do you enjoy watching? I think it's
You
sport.
know the answer to that. It's baseball.
Yeah.
Before I collected records, my friend Dave, the neighbor, got me collecting stamps and baseball cards. And in fact, former Detroit Tiger Tom Timmerman lived down the street. Um, Baseball is still a love. Right now, I'm wondering what time the game is tonight. Oh, that's right. They're on the West Coast, so
They're on
it's
the
a
West
later
Coast
game.
tonight. Yeah, it
Yeah,
hasn't
so
started yet.
it is, even when they were in their down years, I would sort of pay attention, but not as much. And I got on back on the bandwagon long before they got really good again, just because I kind of remembered how much I liked the sport. And for people who find the sport boring, and they might ask you and I what we like about it, and I don't know what you like about it, but I think it's oh, I've never seen that before. And the stats, like something about the stats has always been interesting to me. Like just the weird things that they can come up with that. I'm I liked numbers in elementary and high school. Like I was good at math, so number stuff was always interesting to me. and just some of those like I can't believe they have a 396 batting average or something like that. Like that kind of
Right.
stuff's like, wow, that's great. Just I'm impressed by that sort of stuff. And those plays you if you watch the highlights that MLB sends out every day, I always have like the top 10 plays, and I always watch those looking for something just amazing because you can see something pretty amazing happen in a baseball game.
Do you have a favorite player or a favorite sports memory?
Well, obviously I'm a Tiger fan living here in the Detroit area. The memory that comes to mind is a weird one. I was listening to an opening day game on the radio one day years ago, and I know everybody loves some broadcasters more than others, and no disrespect to the ones that people love, but Dan Dickerson, who still calls the games now, was calling this game. And whoever was supposed to be in center field, could have been Curtis Granderson, was injured at the beginning of the season. And so they had to stick Brandon Inge in center field, which was weird because he's the third baseman. And I was listening to the radio and I could picture, because Dan Dickerson's call of the play was so good, I could picture what was happening. And he threw out a runner at home from deep center field. And it just stuck with me. I got to meet Brandon once at work, actually. He was visiting the sports station next door. And I had to just share with him that memory. Like, of all the things I remember you throwing out a runner at home on opening day from center field. So I don't know why I remember it. Just Dan Dickerson's call was so good that it stuck with me.
And our final category is humor. You've already mentioned some funny TV shows you like to watch. Do you have a favorite, a comedian or comedy TV show or anything comedy related that sticks out?
Comedy related sticks out is definitely the starting point of me thinking I was funny. No, we had you and I were talking before we started recording. I didn't own the 8-track, but my brother did, of Steve Martin's big first two big comedy records. So Steve is definitely a turning point in my appreciation of comedy. Robin Williams became a big part of that, and so did Monty Python. And quite honestly, one of my favorite comedy specials, and I know he's no longer cool to say so, but Bill Cosby's himself was a very funny special. And God rest his soul, George Carlin. He had so many like observations that were brilliant, but those are the comedic high points for me
Yeah.
in my listening of comedy or watching of comedy. The Holy Grail, Monty Python's movie, The
Yep.
Holy Grail. That's my favorite movie of all time. It still makes me laugh. I can still
It's,
quote it.
yeah, I can quote a
It's
lot from it
so
too.
clever. It's
It
so
is.
clever. I mean, in the same way we were talking about music and favorite albums, the Bare Naked Ladies Gordon album is full of those little weird, like you have to listen for the references to get the jokes, but they're in there, and you have to be like astute enough to pick up on the little references, and that's that. The Holy Grail is just like that. Like you have to be paying
Right.
attention. There's a
Right.
there's a lady beating a cat in the background. What's that all about? Like you don't notice it the first couple of times. Like,
Right.
what?
Well, when I first saw it, when that first came out, um, I was at a theater in St. Louis, and there was jokes starting right from the opening credit.
Yes,
And
yes.
if you didn't realize that, and you know, why is this guy laughing already?
Yeah. Also with. Yeah, no, that's just a great movie. It's stupid funny, but it's funny
Yeah, yeah.
too. So,
And
and the jerk.
who's the best at making you laugh, and who are you able to crack up?
Um, I don't think that many people find me that funny. There are a few people who laugh at me. I think I'm funny. Um, making me I guess the only way I can answer that is if you're talking about people that I actually know, not comedians that I've never met. I
Yeah,
assume
people
that's what
that
the
you
question
know,
is.
who makes you laugh? That you.
I like laughing with Rachel Davis, the singer. She and I just
Mhm.
have a really good rapport, and
Yeah.
her laugh is contagious, and we make each other laugh, I think. So there's often the question that you didn't ask, who's your favorite person to interview? And it's pretty much always been her because we just have a good time together. We enjoy making each other laugh. Um, I have to say, is there anybody in my life that makes me laugh that I see on a more regular occasion than that? I mean, there's the occasional person who will throw me something fun. I've got a couple of coworkers who've got great sense of humor. Nick Thompson, who does the Sunday morning show, he's funny as heck, and our weekend news guy John Stockwell is pretty funny as well. Um,
Anybody ever try to make you laugh when you were on the air?
when we're doing fundraising,
Yeah.
occasionally we'll do that to each other. Just, I mean, it's better radio if people are
Yeah.
smiling anyway, right?
Yeah.
Um, working for a music slash news station, there's not always reasons to be able to laugh, though. Working for a news station, I do hear some funny stories sometimes. Like, did you hear the story about the guy who got injured in a very aggressive game of peekaboo?
No.
He's in the ICU. That's not a real story. That's a dad joke.
Well, speaking of stories, it's time. It's that time of the podcast. We'll ask you to tell a story. So, what would you like to tell us about?
Oh, goodness. I had something picked up before we started, and now I lost what it was. It was probably something I already mentioned. It's a pretty significant moment in my life when that U of M Dearborn story where that student randomly asked me for notes. That, if you think about the butterfly effect, people talk about the butterfly effect. If she doesn't come up to me and ask me for notes that day, you and I probably don't even meet. Like, there's so many things that don't happen if she doesn't ask me that question.
Hmm.
Because I don't find out about WHFR and I don't start volunteering there and I don't meet all these music friends that some of these people are my favorite people and I don't have these opportunities to talk to Ed Sheeran and Colin Hay and Brian Vander Ark and all the Stephen Page, all these great people that I've interviewed over the years. It doesn't happen without that woman coming up to me and asking me for my notes. And it's just remarkable to think about that one strange, insignificant at the time moment leading to something that is so important to who I am. I mean, if I ended up getting a job in marketing somehow with my degree, do I enjoy my life? I mean, really, so weird and so significant. I did have a chance because we're Facebook friends. We're never really real friends. She was just in my classes, and because we were both at the station for a period of time, we became Facebook friends. And I watched that she moved around to New York and Upper Michigan and da, da, da. And I noticed that she was back in the Detroit area. Like, I have to take her out and thank her. I took her out to dinner and bought her a drink and just talked to her about, like, these are the things that you made happen in my life. It was just, I needed to do that. I needed to let her know because, she probably had no, I'd thank her every year on her birthday because I'd see that on Facebook and I'd thank her every year for giving me a career, but I never got to tell her face to face. I never saw her. Probably after she left the Dearborn area. I don't think I ever saw her again. So yeah, it's weird how somebody can be such a small but significant part of your life.
Right. I've had exactly the same thoughts about moments that seem entirely random and there's no real reason why they would have happened. But then because they did, your life has changed dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily, it actually does. I was gonna say it doesn't necessarily change who I'm friends with. 100% it does. So many of my friends are a ripple effect from that moment. The people that I call my closest friends are people I've met probably in the last 15, 20 years because those are the people I interact with my love of music with. And so you included, right? Um,
Indeed.
it's a significant part of my life. I mentioned at the beginning, I can't really remember a lot of my childhood. There's little bits and pieces, stupid things that I told you about my elementary school. You know, moments with dad are very few and far between. He took me to a football game once, which is weird because I never expressed any interest in football, and used to take all of his kids on the occasional ride on his motorcycle. But you'd hang on the back of the motorcycle, hold on to him. You're not having a conversation, right? You're just riding along on the motorcycle. I remember some of that. I mean, I remember, jumping in the pool, the slip and slide. Just, I remember the first birthday gift I can remember was something. I was born in late November, so getting anything that involved being outdoors was probably not a great gift, but it was a warm mid-November, and they gave me my big wheel early in that. I remember because it was cool to have a big wheel then. And I got to ride it, and I got my birthday gift early. It's the only birthday gift I remember.
Well, I want to wrap up with a little story of my own. First of all, I'd like to point out that you were born in 1967, which in my mind is the greatest year in
Pretty
music
damn,
history.
pretty damn good year.
Yeah. So you may not have discovered the Beatles till later on, but Sergeant Pepper came out that year.
I'm aware. It wasn't the number one song when I was born, but yeah.
And there was a couple of singles that came out before that, which were Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields, A
Mhm.
B side. That was a pretty good single, as I recall.
Yeah.
So you picked a good year to be born. My story is about the time that you came to visit us in Florida. This was March 2020. And if that
Yeah,
time rings a bell, it's because the world was about to change right about then.
right about that. That's the last one of the last fun things I did, other than going to see Howard Jones the day before the world shut down.
And you said that you wanted to come down and catch a couple of Tigers spring training games. And there were two teams that played in Fort Myers. So you got to go to two games with against two different opponents. And we
Twins
were
and Red
staying down there.
Sox?
What's that?
Is it Twins and Red Sox? Do I remember that
Yes,
right?
Twins and Red Sox is correct. So Barb and I were staying the winter down in Bonita Springs, and we said, sure, come on down. And we got tickets to both games. But right around then, we started to get a little antsy, concerned about this pandemic that was spreading around, right? We were kind of watching where it was. I remember you'd say, oh, it's in the state of Washington. Well, that's far away. Oh, now it's getting closer. And so there was awareness, like Barb will say that, she was aware not to touch the railing when we were going
Oh,
in the stadium. And then
wow.
afterwards we went to a meal where we were a little wary of being too close to anyone, and the ceiling was low. But it was just right about the time that everything changed. But we did get to see those two baseball games before everything got shut down
Without masks.
without masks, indeed. So
And then soon we were wearing masks everywhere we went.
we were
Yeah.
wearing masks. We were worried about, when we drove home from that time, we were wiping down the fuel pump with
Oh, yeah.
wipes, and it was really. So anyway, that was an interesting memory that we got that in before everything stopped.
I
So
was your last friend you saw before the pandemic.
that's right.
I
And
wasn't
then
in.
after that, it was like drive straight through to get home. And then for a long time, I never went anywhere. I just walked around the neighborhood outside. That was about it.
You didn't have a little bubble of people you trusted.
My bubble consisted primarily of my wife. That was about it.
Yeah. It was a strange time for sure. And well, we didn't all survive it, but anybody listening to this apparently did.
We
But
did. Yeah.
yeah, it was a very, there was a lot of changes then. So
So,
yeah.
well, I want to thank you, John, for joining the podcast today. Thank you for your friendship over the years, for your support of music. I'm a loyal listener to your show. I listen to the 9 a.m. Sunday show on Radio Cobra Detroit. And I encourage everyone listening to this to check that out, or the one that follows it, Sonic Coast at 10 o'clock Sunday mornings.
Thank you for that.
Check out the Acoustic Alternatives podcast that John does. Subscribe to that, and then get on to Patreon and support John's work through Patreon. It doesn't cost much. For the cost of a cup of coffee a month, you can help support the fine work that John does. So, John, it's been my pleasure to have you today. Thanks for being such a good friend.
Thanks, Stan. Thanks for making me number 3. Woo, number 3. Appreciate the time.